What if you had zero fear of economic insecurity? What would that be like? I had a little taste of it early on in recovery. I've been chasing that insight ever since. It comes and goes. I'd say I'm a lot better than I would be if I didn't have a program, and if I wasn't sober. I think I would be much more fearful about things like that. It doesn't trouble me too much today. But when I first got clean again, I had one of those profound lessons guided by my elders in recovery, one of whom, several of whom were very wise and experienced, and my own personal mentor, Big Jim D, who people from West London will know. He's passed on now, but he gave me an incredible lesson which I want to tell you about. So it was back when I was working as a construction worker in early recovery, toiling away in Finsbury Park. I think we were doing a refurbishment in Finsbury Park, and I used to get 100 quid cash every Friday, and I'd take it to the bank and put it in. So I think it must have been a weekend when I went to the ATM to draw out some money, and instead of there being 100 quid in there, or 50 quid or whatever it was, because I was always in overdraft. Okay, so I knew exactly how much was supposed to be in there. Probably would have been something like £30, and it was 1,030 or 930, something like that. So it was clear to me that the bank teller had tapped an extra nought onto the £100 cash deposit. So of course my initial reaction was yippee. I was pretty pleased about that. Bear in mind, I was living in one room, actually a shared flat, where the landlord was sleeping in the living room and I was sleeping in the bedroom, which was so small that the mattress pretty much took up the entire floor space. When my daughter came to stay, I would literally sleep on the floor in the lavatory with my head next to the toilet. My bedsheet was so old and worn out, there was a hole the size of a football where my bum was. I couldn't even afford new bed sheets. They were so worn out. Okay, so yeah, let's just say I could do with that extra 900 quid pretty badly. Anyway, it didn't last long, because I told my mentor, Jim D, and he said, well, you've got to give it back. Which was not what I was hoping to hear. That really stung, actually. I was quite angry with him for about a minute, until I got where he was coming from, and then he did what he always used to do, which he'd lay some profound biblical teaching on me or something. I think that one was, he's going to sound ridiculous, but he said, give unto Caesar what is Caesar's. Can you imagine how annoying that was? Which of course means whoever it belongs to, give it to them. My reading of that Bible passage has always been that they were complaining, saying they didn't owe the taxes, and Jesus said, whose face is on the coin? And it was Caesar's. Pay your taxes. So in other words, follow the laws of the land. When you're getting clean from drugs and alcohol, rigorous honesty along with radical personal accountability is one of the things that is not optional. And that was what he was trying to tell me, and he wished to see me, how would we say, truly understand that, right? And so the only way you usually really understand things is to go through them and suffer a certain amount of pain, or undergo a certain amount of sacrifice in order to learn the lesson, and boy did it work. So he said, yeah, give it back. So I rang them, as you did in those days. There was a a number in Newcastle upon Tyne, I think. You ring that. They think you're crazy. Yes, Mr. Mordy, of course, whatever. Yep. And I couldn't get it sent back. It just went on for months. I wrote to them. After about 2 or 3 months, Jim said, well, just keep it then. You've suffered the pain anyway, which I had. I'd already let it go. I'd already lost it. And they just thought I was nuts. So it was one of those weird ones where the administration of giving it back to them was just, I couldn't be overcome. So I actually wound up keeping it. But I was really trying quite hard to give it back to them. So what did I learn there? I learned that following a certain code of conduct, which instills integrity, that I know means I'm in integrity, is more important to my development than having all of my wants and needs and comforts attended to. So to be sort of solid in spirit, as it were, always trumps being materially prosperous. Of course, if you can get the material prosperity, you should do so. But you can't cut those corners. And that's what Jim was trying to teach me, I think. And indeed, that is pretty much the moment when my financial recovery took off, funnily enough, because there's another attitude that goes hand in hand with that, which is when you don't worry, you've got a more open atmosphere about you, more open vibe, a more trustworthy vibe. Perhaps you take more healthy risks and things like that because you're not neurotically worried about money. If you know that you're going to be okay, that other biblical teaching, take no thought for the morrow, if you kind of live that way, it rubs off, it comes out of you. I don't think there's even necessarily anything spooky about it. It's about other people and the way that you come over, your energy can't be faked. So with that drastically lessened fear of economic insecurity, which was driven into me by experiencing it and foregoing things I could easily have stolen and just suffering it, made me tougher in financial terms. And then opportunities just started coming in. So I can't fully explain it. All I can say is that to have that as a rule, financial honesty is actually one of the easier types of honesty to have when you're in recovery, because there are other types of honesty, like emotional honesty. They're actually much more difficult to work out whether you're being honest or not. But financial honesty is pretty cut and dried. Either you are or you aren't, and you know it. So all those arguments that were popping up into my head that I never have anymore, but which I would have had as an angry young man, it's the patriarchal power structure, and why should I pay them back? Everybody apart from Jim was laughing at me and saying, you don't need to pay them back, the bastards, And Jim was way ahead of his time with that stuff. And I now, at 53, I'm in complete agreement with him. No, we don't get to decide who we steal off. There aren't people who are worthy of stealing from, or it's okay to steal from, and people who it isn't. It's for you. So the other sort of tangent of this that comes to mind, especially when I'm talking to young men, is gallantry or gentlemanly behavior. A lot of young men will say things like, I don't want to do those things anymore, like hold a door open for a woman or something like that, because they don't treat me well or something like that. And I'm like, it's actually for you. I mean, I don't think I've ever had, I suppose there are a lot of women who wouldn't want the door held open for them these days, but take me, for example, that's how I was raised. That's how my mother raised me, and I just do it automatically. And I've never had a woman or a girl sort of get upset or angry about that. But if I ever did, and they said something like, "You don't have to do that for me," I think my answer would probably be, "I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for me." Because that's my code of conduct, right? So the rigorous honesty thing is a bit like that. We're actually doing it for ourselves, right?